morning. Welcome to Pete's Garage. This weekend, we worked on a couple of other things. One of the things that I have to be doing is actually fixing my Jeep. Yesterday, I fixed the winch controller that I broke when I ran it over when I was off-roading last weekend, and that sucked. Another thing I have to do is fix my front differential because it's leaking. So, enjoy. Alright, so the last time I went wheeling, last weekend, on the night run, I forgot to put my winch controller back in the Jeep when we took off, and I ran it over and I split it in half. And I've already trimmed the ends because I'm getting ready to splice it all back together. But I believe that other than the broken wire, which will be easily repaired, nothing else happened. Anyway, so I'm going to go about repairing this. Okay, so I am starting to solder the wires together. And one of the very first steps that I need to do before I can actually make my connections is I need to tin my wires. And what I mean by tinning my wires is I need to take a little bit of solder and infuse the copper with the solder inside it. And so I'll get the wire really hot and melt it, and it'll actually coat the strands of copper inside. If you don't do that, you're not going to get a good solder connection when you try and put your wires together, and they're going to come apart. And it's just an unfortunate thing. But you should do this with all of your wires whenever you're soldering stuff together. Alright, so I'll just show you a little bit of how this works. And hopefully I won't get DCMA'd. See? Just like that. And then when I go to do the other one and I connect them, I can just put a little glob of solder in the middle and then they'll attach right up. So we just do that to 9 more, and everything is good. These connections will be permanent and strong, which I need because this is my winch cable, and or my winch controller cable, and it's going to take abuse. It's going to be flung in and out of the Jeep, and it's going to be hung on things, and it's going to be stretched and twisted, and just things like this lead a hard life. And so it's worth taking the time to do it right. I don't like that. It's worth it if you're going to do this a lot to buy a decent solder station. For the longest time I was working off of this horrible little soldering iron that I bought out of the parts store. Over time my good soldering iron died because I didn't take care of it very well. And one day to finish a project I just bought a junk iron at the parts store. And it got the job done, but it did not last very long, and it wasn't very good. So I was constantly frustrated with it, and I decided, screw it, I'm just going to spend a little bit of money and buy a decent solder station. And I bought this thing on Amazon from Tillswall, and it's controllable, and it has a controllable heat, and I run right around 750 to 800 degrees. That seems to give me the best control of the solder. So what I'm doing now is I'm trimming them all down because the connection doesn't have to be very big. And so you don't need a big sloppy thing. And then let's see, let's get some heat shrink set up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6. Another thing that I did, and I've been playing around with seeing if this would work or not, and I decided to try it on this one. I'm sure it will. I offset the cuts so that I wouldn't have a big clump of heat shrunk connections right in the middle of the wire. And then I'll use one of these big tubes to close it all up once I'm done. I'm going to... This is just a string that provides flexibility to the cable. Because I'm splicing, I don't really need it, and it's in my way. And so this one section is going to be, I'm gonna tape it up with hose repair tape once I'm done with all of this. So, don't forget to put your heat shrink on the wires before you solder them together. Otherwise, you will have to take it apart and redo it. Because unless you have a magic type of heat shrink that I don't, the heat shrink has to be on the tube. So I'm going to solder all my connections together, and then I will change over and heat shrink everything with the heat gun, which I have found is a much superior way to do heat shrink than running it over with a soldering iron or using a lighter. Alright, so let's do... Let's do blue first. Alright, so to make the connection, now that your wires are tinned properly, get them out, grab your soldering iron, put just a little glob of solder on the end, and then grab your wire that you want to connect. In this case it's super easy because we're just going color to color. Then melt them together, hold it for a second to let the solder go, and that's it. That's all it takes. And that is a nice, solid connection. Oh, and some sort of magic fingers or holding clamp or whatever is a necessity. Harness is back together. Oh, and it worked. Look, everything lines up, and now I'm not going to have a big clump of heat shrink right in the middle. Nice. That's not good. That is actually getting worse. I probably should not have wheeled it last weekend, but the fact that there's still oil leaking out means that there's still oil in it, right? Of course. So today, I'm going to tackle this. I have this ancient old G2 cast diff cover, which is really pretty and completely worthless for off-roading because that. That's the drain plug, and as you can see, it's not round anymore because I keep hitting it on rocks, which I tend to do when I'm off-roading. And normally it's not an issue. The bottom of the housing grinds a little bit, and I'm used to weepy diff covers, but what's actually happening here is that there's an O-ring. You can't see it very clearly, but there's actually a bolt right there. And there's an O-ring behind it, and every time it gets hit, that O-ring gets smushed, and then it stops holding oil. And so I'm going to fix that today. My ultimate fix is going to be taking this diff cover off and chucking it in the trash and putting a regular stamped steel Dana 44 cover on there. So, fun times.